The Albanese government is being pushed to let tens of thousands of foreign workers into Australia, and soon. Despite the unemployment rate dropping, the job crisis in the nation faces is holding business back. It's really a skill shortage. Joining me live now is the New South Wales Treasurer Matt Kean. Matt Kean, thanks for your time. Why aren't you going to the Job Summit next week?
Well, First Ministers have been invited, so the Premier's been invited, but it's interesting that Treasurers haven't been invited, given that we play an important role in supporting our state economies and the national economy. I think there's a real opportunity to engage Treasurers across the nation to participate in the Job Summit.
How many workers does New South Wales need now? How short are you?
New South Wales Treasury predicts that there is a shortage due to the closed borders during COVID of around 300,000 workers here in New South Wales. I mean, that's having a huge impact on our small businesses, on our business community, and obviously rising inflation here in New South Wales. We need to immediately get workers into the country. And I've been briefed that there is a backlog of 65,000 skilled workers that are waiting to come into the country. So the current Labor government, they don't need to have a skills summit. They don't need to wait for the union permission from their union mates. They need to start stamping passports today. That's the thing that will have the biggest impact in supporting small businesses and supporting our economy at this time.
So what is the delay? What is the hold-up? Because I hear anecdotally as well that visa processing is, it can be 12 months, it can be even longer.
Well, I'm not sure what the hold-up is, but what we know is that there are currently 65,000 people, skilled workers, waiting to come into the country that will help alleviate this skills crisis that we're currently seeing. And the only thing standing in the way is the federal government's processing of visas. So they need to stop talking and they need to start stamping passports. That's what I'm calling for today, Laura.
Okay, but there is a process here, and there is a balance between how many migrants you actually let into the country every year. Do you have a figure in mind for New South Wales?
Well, New South Wales Treasury predicts that there is a backlog of 300,000 workers in this state due to the closed borders during the COVID period. So we're not asking to increase the number of migrants coming into the country. We're just asking to catch up on the migration that was lost due to COVID. So again, we don't need to wait for a skills summit. We don't need to wait for permission from the unions. We just need to start stamping passports, and that's what I'm calling for.
These skill shortages seem to be not just unique to Australia and New South Wales, I might say, but are we suffering in part, do you think, from reputational damage from COVID at a federal level? Is Australia just not as desirable to come and work as it once was?
Well, I think countries all around the world are seeing the same challenges when it comes to skills, when it comes to the labour market. But, when there's a race on, it's important that Australia not be at the back of the pack. And we can get to the front of the pack by speeding up the processing time for visas and ensuring that we're encouraging people to come down under. That's what I think that we should be doing right now, and I want to support the Commonwealth Government in attempts to get labour into the market. Let's speed up our visa processing. Let's encourage people to come here, because we know this is a great destination and people want to come to Australia. And in fact, there is a backlog of 65,000 people who are waiting to come into the country right now, today, Laura, waiting to come in, and all we need to do is stamp their passports.
Okay, you've talked a lot about migration as a key to fixing the problem, but what about upskilling? I mean, you promised an extra 10,000 health workers in the budget. That was a few months ago. How many have you employed now to date?
Well, of course, more migration will help deal with the immediate impacts of the labour shortages that we're facing. But we need to also be investing in the skills and training required to make our workforce more resilient, more competitive over the medium and long term. And that's what we're doing here in New South Wales. Just recently in the state budget, we implemented reforms, our childcare reforms, for example, that will unlock the potential for more than 95,000 women to stay in work or take on more hours. And that will help deal with some of these these labour shortages. And in addition to that, ensure that women are able to participate as fully in the economy as their male counterparts. These are the type of initiatives that will unlock more potential in our economy over the medium to long term. But in the short term, the quickest thing we can do to get labour into the country is to start stamping visas. We know there are 65,000 people just waiting to come into the country. They're desperate to come into the country today. And all we need to do is get the bureaucracy out of the way, stop waiting for permission from the union movement, stop waiting to have a skills summit. We don't need to wait for the October budget handed down. We just need to start stamping visas, and we can do it immediately.
You promised 10,000 health workers in the budget. How many?
We're cracking on with the job of getting people into our health system immediately. We've put the funding aside, and our health department is working overtime. Just recently as 2 weeks ago, I was out meeting new recruits into our ambulance system. So we're recruiting them from other states, other territories. We're training up our kids through our universities, through our vocational education and training. Not right on me today, Laura, but I've been out there meeting our new recruits, hundreds of new recruits coming into the system. But what we want to see is more people coming into the country immediately, more people being trained in our TAFE, in our university system, and getting into our workforce. That's the quickest thing that we can do to support our labour market and our economy.
Okay, I don't expect you to have that figure on you because that was a surprise, that question, of course. But can you tell us, is it more like hundreds rather than thousands of extra healthcare workers after that promise in the budget?
The Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, tells me that we're on track to meet the targeted number of workers that we need in our health system. There are a number of strategies that they've got in place to do that, but it is a challenging environment. We're not going to shy away from that. And one of the things we can do to address these issues is start increasing the number of migrants coming into the country. The 65,000 people waiting to have their passports stamped need to have that done immediately. Not wait for a job summit, not wait for the October budget, and not wait for permission from the unions. Let's get it done, Laura.
Treasurer, what about some of the constraints in the local market as well? I mean, is the government still paying $750 to people who are close contacts of COVID?
Well, the government is obviously working through the issues to keep the community safe, but also keep our economy going. That's what we've done the whole way through this COVID crisis, Laura. And we want to prioritise getting people back into the workforce, and that's our priority.
But the point is, so there's no longer a government requirement to isolate if you are a close contact. You only have to isolate if you actually have COVID. So why are we still paying that $750 to people who are close contacts?
Well, what we need to do, Laura, is make sure that people aren't penalised for keeping the community safe. We're working through that process at the moment, but, you know, this is not going to deal with the massive labour crisis that we're seeing right at the moment. What we need to do is get migration happening. 65,000 people waiting to come into the country. Yeah. We're investing in vocational training and education here in New South Wales, and we're ensuring that we're unlocking the potential for more people to participate in the economy. That's what good governments do. That's what we're doing here in New South Wales, and we want to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Commonwealth to deal with these challenges.
But I mean, as Treasurer, don't you think that payment needs to be changed? The isolation rules need to change. That would make life a lot easier in New South Wales, wouldn't it?
We're working through those issues, Laura. Okay. We're looking to make New South Wales the best place to live, to work and to run a business. And there are a number of things that we're doing to ensure that happens.
I tell you what, it's not a great place to live at the moment if you need to use the trains. What is going on? When is this going to end?
Well, it is shameful. Just this morning, there are thousands of children that can't get to school, their parents can't get to work, and small businesses are being absolutely crushed by this industrial warfare that's being waged by Alex Classens and the Rail Union. It is absolutely disgraceful. I mean, the Rail Union and the Labor Party are holding the New South Wales public to ransom. They're treating them like their political plaything over something that the New South Wales government has said it would fix. So they're saying that these new inner city trains, which are currently being mothballed, $2 billion worth of rolling stock. They made demands that we had to rip out CCTV cameras, rip out sensor technology from trains that were deemed to be safe by the safety regulator. The government agreed to do that, and yet the rail unions are still going on strike. It is absolutely shameful. It has nothing to do with safety. It has nothing to do with pay. It has everything to do with politics. And Chris Minns should tell his mates in the union movement to stop holding the public to ransom for their political games.
Talking of political games, I mean, one of your own, David Elliott, said it's you who stuffed it up. Something along the lines of, you're a boy being sent in to do a man's job.
Well, the reality here is that Alex Classens and the union movement are holding the public to ransom over demands that the government has already met. I, as the Treasurer, have already accepted that we will meet the union demands to rip out safety equipment from these trains. And remember what that looks like. These are trains that the safety regulator, the national safety regulator, has said are safe and ready to run on our tracks. But the union movement is saying that we've got to make them less safe by taking out CCTV cameras, ripping out sensor technology, and that was what was going to be required to stop them striking. Well, the government's agreed to do that. I, as the Treasurer, have agreed to do that, and yet the unions are still going on strike. So let's be very clear what this is about. It's not about pay, it's not about safety, it's all about politics, and this is part of a union campaign working with Chris Minns and the Labor Party to get the Labor Party elected here in New South Wales. It is shameful and it needs to be called out.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. Matt Kean, thanks so much for your time as always. We'll speak soon.
Thanks, Laura.